get us rolling. And here is Shakita, so that is perfect timing. Let's let her log in. Ah. Hi, Shakita. Can you hear us?
Morning, everyone. Yes, I can. Good morning. Good
Oh,
morning.
good. All right. So I am going to kick things off then. I think we got almost everybody here. So, all right, folks, welcome to session 2 of IJNR's Great Lakes Energy Futures Workshop. Today, we're exploring the community and the people impacts of all this legislation and technology and things we've been talking about over the last few weeks. And so for this session, we're going to focus more on workforce development, which is something that a lot of people have brought up as a cool opportunity to plug in, sorry for the pun, to a lot of new jobs, but also as a way to connect communities that have historically been left out of this kind of economy, get connected to that. So we're excited to talk about that. And to tell that story, we will eventually have 4 folks with us. One can't join till later. So who we have with us right now is Cleveland Smith. He's a program manager at OAI, and OAI is a nonprofit organization that offers workforce education training and placement services. Cleveland leads OAI's EPA Brownfield Job Training Program and its Financial Opportunity Center, in addition to managing OAI's Environmental Career Workers Training Programs in Chicago, Dallas, St. Louis, Kansas City, and Indianapolis, which sounds like a lot of places and must keep you very busy. Cleveland has been at the forefront of the solar industry since the Future Energy Jobs Act legislation came to Illinois and is excited about future possibilities. Cleveland's a Chicago native and considers California his second home. He's also a U.S. veteran, father, husband, and passionate believer in second chances. And he is committed to working on removing all barriers to employment for those in underserved and overlooked communities. So it's awesome to have Cleveland with us. Joining Cleveland also from OAI is Shakita Slater. Shakita is a program manager of OAI's Pre-Employment Education and Training Department. She currently manages the Solar Training Program alongside the Environmental Career Workers Training, funded by the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. Shakita brings a wealth of experience to the OAI team, having worked in nonprofit leadership and management for over 10 years. She holds a bachelor's degree in corporate communications from Northern Illinois University and is passionate about solar training and introducing environmental remediation and renewable energy concepts to underserved communities in Chicago. And joining them is a recent graduate of one of OAI's training programs. We have Helena Kennedy on the phone, and Helena has graciously agreed to join us on, I believe, her lunch break. She, as I said, is a recent graduate of an OAI training program and is a mature, reliable, and motivated college student from the South Side of Chicago who is studying in business and entrepreneurship while obtaining certifications in multiple potential careers and occupations. She currently works for a travel solar company that we'll hear about as an apprentice, as well as serving in positions for quality control and logistics. So I think John won't be able to join till later, and Helena has a hard stop at 1, so we should get into the conversation here. We could either have Helena go first, or maybe Cleveland and Shakita. It would make more sense for you to introduce OAI and the work you do there, and then Helena could tell us about her experience.
Sure, that sounds fantastic. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. You all see that?
We can see that, and now the trick is going to be when you hit present, we're seeing the slides, like the There we go.
Yep.
Oh, Cleveland, you're already making the first session of the day look like they don't know what they're doing. You're doing great. All right, take it away.
All right. So thanks for inviting us on to talk a little bit about OAI and our involvement in solar. So the slides that I'm going to show you is mostly about OAI, and then we can dive a little bit deeper into solar in itself. But I want to introduce you guys to OAI. So the slides will cover who is OAI, what exactly it is that we do, who benefits from the services that we offer, and what our future is like. So OAI, we actually began as a small project launched 1976, and it was to help Chinese immigrants really in the social and economic. So our founder, she is part of her heritage is Chinese, and so she saw how individuals were coming over to America and they were really struggling to get started. So that was one of the reasons why OEI originally formed. Today, we're a nonprofit that focuses on high quality technical and educational training with employment goals. So there we go. So OAI has four major training departments. One is called PETE, which is a department that Shaquita and myself work for. PETE is called the Pre-Employment Education and Training Department. And what we do is provide job placement, training, retention services, financial literacy, obviously solar panel installation training, environmental remediation, hazardous waste removal, construction, some landscaping, other green industries. And the best part about all of this, for the Chicago location, is all of these are encompassed into one training. So it's a package deal. Now, our Indianapolis, St. Louis, Kansas City, and Dallas locations, which is part of our consortium for the PETE department, they're strictly for the PETE department. Their training is a little different. So they don't, as of today, they don't offer solar. But that's something we want to change. But we look at reducing barriers to employment, whatever that barrier may be. We work diligently to try to get those removed. We also have what's called our BWT department, which is the business and worker training. They provide worker health and safety training in compliance with OSHA and some other things to emergency first responders, medical first receivers, and industry workers who work with hazardous materials. So if you say there's an organization that already exists and they want to get their workers trained, whether it be for OSHA or HAZWOPER, this side of our organization is actually for profit. Now they do receive some funding to assist those who can't afford it, but this is partially a for-profit part of what we do because we're training individuals who already have employment in that case. Another department is called OCS, that name really is based on their location. So that's OEI, Chicago, Southland. So they're similar to what we do downtown Chicago, but not quite the same. So their focus is in healthcare, manufacturing, logistics. They're about to get into EVs, electric vehicles. And they also do a little bit of focus on entrepreneurship development as well. So they're focused on the surrounding communities out this way, which is southwest suburbs of Chicago, I should say, I'm sorry. Southwest suburbs of Chicago. So a lot of their focus is out here. And then our next program is Highbridge. And they address the critical issues of maintaining green stormwater infrastructure, partnering with communities, landowners, to really work on neglected areas. They do a lot of landscaping work, for communities, for private individuals. Highbridge is also a for-profit under our nonprofit as well. So those are the four major programs, departments, and the programs that they run. Now, there are other things that we do, but it is a lot to swallow. So the next thing I want to talk about is who really benefits from what we do at OAI. Well, the first person or the first group would be the participants. They're learning the skills, the tools that they need to, find gainful employment that typically pays them above average wages. So we're talking, individuals who come in and Helena will be able to attest to this, sometimes working 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet and really struggling to survive, to having a significant change to where, now they're working in a career versus working 2 or 3 different jobs. And in this career, after a few months of training, they're making enough money to cover, what they were making in those 2 to 3 jobs in some cases. Families of those individuals are also impacted in a great way by what we do, because these participants, a lot of our participants are students, trainees, there's different names that we call them. They have children. They have parents, they have grandparents who are sometimes in the same household, and providing that change for them is very impactful. And we've seen it because we've been around for about 47 years. We've seen in that time how it's impacted generations. Employers. We do a lot of work with employers. And because of that, when an employer builds rapport with us, they get to know us, we get to know them, we understand what their needs are. And because of that, we end up in a relationship where they can trust that anybody we send to them is somebody that's going to fit the description of what they're looking for, their culture, and ideally work ethics. The communities. Well, because we work with participants from all backgrounds, meaning people who have convictions, criminal convictions, anybody from 18 years old on up. We've had somebody as old as 65 years old go through our training and find work. But because of that, the communities are impacted in a way where if you're dealing with somebody who's suffered from recidivism, where they just couldn't seem to get it right. Well, we've been able to impact lives in a way that those same people come realize that there's something else available to them. And when they make that change, they in turn go back and change their communities, because now they're no longer returning back to that same lifestyle. Not only that, but they're calling others higher in what they do as well. The local economy benefits in a lot of ways, because a lot of our students, we've seen this happen, especially since now we are a financial opportunity center with an organization called LISC. But the local economy is affected in a powerful way too, because participants with this new spending power that they have, sometimes our students are the first ones in their home, in their families to purchase a home. We've seen that happen. They're purchasing vehicles or maybe even a second vehicle for their household to be able to live the lifestyle that they really want to live. And Uncle Sam, got to pay the taxes, y'all. Got to pay the taxes. So we've seen how through the work that we've done, and there's been a national study done on this too, on how the work that we're doing in creating new opportunities for folks, that this has had an impact on the amount of taxes that's being paid. And forgive me, I have to go back a little bit because I failed to mention that one of our biggest funders, our actual biggest funder, is the National Institute for Environmental Health Sciences. And I actually have their logo on one of the slides, but I want to make sure I mention them. Here, I just added a few photos. of, since we're talking about solar, these photos are particularly around solar. The first photo in the my upper left-hand corner, that's actually students in training. The other two are students who have graduated and they were at work and they're actually on real projects. The young lady with the pink hat on, she is one of our former students. She is known in the industry as the Solar Princess. She's been interviewed by ComEd, several other agencies, because of the fantastic job she's been doing in solar. She was promoted pretty quickly. She's in the process of starting her own solar business, and just really achieving some great things. That next slide, towards the bottom, those are a few different community organizations who have partnered with a developer called NextAmp. And through NextAmp, we are looking to offer more education and training as well as employment opportunities. And then on the last slide with the gentleman all dressed up, that is a graduating class from one of our cohorts. That's one of our cohorts of graduates. And that, as you can see, that sign says Amplify because we do partner with other organizations to offer the training that we bring. These slides here, these images here are images taken from some of the actual training, people in training, because forklift, basic construction. In 2 weeks' time, these guys learned how to basically frame a garage, install roofing, drywall, a variety of things. In just about a 2 weeks time. And 2 weeks is strictly for the construction piece. On the lower part, we have some CPR first aid photo. We have a photo of an employer coming in to engage the students while they're still in training. Upper right-hand corner, that's a photo of some students during a HAZWOPER class. They're getting prepared as if they were going out to work on a hazardous site. And last slide, our future. I chose this image because of the sun shining through the trees, because I like to say our future is bright. When I consider the fact that we're looking to expand our solar offerings, our OCS department, Southland Chicago, is about to undertake a new training, which is EV. And we want to expand on our construction as well as we're looking to partner with other organizations to be able to bring the trades, whether it's electrical, masons, construction. We want to get our students into the unions as well, the trades. So that is what we're looking to do in the future. And I thank you for your time.
Right. Thanks, Cleveland. Shakita, I know, did you have a presentation as well? Or were you
No, it was a joint presentation.
okay, good. So, and you're here for Q&A as well, but which is great. So yeah, we want to make sure we leave ample time for our journalists to ask questions. Our last session got a little off track on that front. But Helena, maybe you had a few thoughts or things you wanted to say just to introduce yourself and your experience at OAI.
Oh, she says she has a little extra time now.
Oh yeah. Well, good. Well, we'll don't tell everybody that. They'll use it. They will ask lots of questions. But if I don't know if you're able to yeah, just give us a little bit of a background on your experience with OAI and what you're doing now. That'd be awesome. And then we can open the floor up to questions. There you go.
Hello.
Hey.
I'm not sure about the signal, so if you can just let me know if you guys can hear me okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, awesome. So again, hi, my name is Helena Kennedy. I went through the program spring for 2023. which was the duration of April to July. And literally a month after our celebration slash graduation, I started work for Radiant Solar, which is based out of Atlanta, Georgia, but they have many projects and do partnerships from the Midwest through the East, and now they're starting to branch out in the West, and they're actually trying to get some work in California. My experience during that time was life-changing. I had a lot of hardships and was able to get assistance and knowledge on things that, unfortunately, coming from Chicago neighborhoods that aren't really either up to date or don't have the resources, just basic knowledge on either finances, education, work opportunities, and main thing, resources. I can not stress that enough. So I am greatly appreciative of OAI, Amplify, and the other programs that they network with to help us find resources and helping us get on track. I have been able to recruit for other cohorts and programs, as well as send in resumes directly to HR for my company specifically. And we have actually, I believe, 4 new hires coming on to work on another project out here in Illinois. And I will be able to work with them. So again, testimony for it does help the participants. When it comes to the family, I was able to finish school, take care of my mother and my grandmother who were going through health issues at the time and had to have surgeries, and not be affected by those hardships because I did have that support. Again, I was one of the participants before the program, working 3 jobs, 70 hours a week, just to basically maintain average living. And even then still struggling or not fully having the ability to take care of things correctly at certain points. I went from making what I make working 3 jobs monthly to making that in 2 weeks. So it was a blessing for me, for sure. Excuse me. Honestly, even now, they have helped me with getting work materials, such as either vests, coats, hard hats, boots, things for work, as well as scholarships for continuing education. So yes, I'm grateful, very much so. That's pretty much what I have right now, unless there's any more specific questions or things that anyone would like to ask to know about in detail.
They're
Thanks,
coming.
Lena, so much. Yeah, and so there will be more questions, but Shaquita hasn't gotten to introduce herself in her role at OAI. So why don't you go ahead and do that, and then we'll open the floor and let our reporters ask away.
Will do. Morning, everyone. My name is Shaquita Slater. Helena, it's so good to see you. Good job, Cleveland. Yeah, so I've been with OAI now for about 6 years. I've also been a part of the solar track since it came on board to our organization back in 2018. I was actually completely unaware of it, and that's where I got my my grounds kind of stuck in, well, not stuck in, but I started to tread my journey with solar then, and I've been in this process, and I've seen so many students come in and go into this field, and it's changed even since 2018. And so to hear Helena's story is extremely beautiful. But yeah, solar is one of those topics that is forever changing. It's constantly growing. And to introduce such a new innovation in the world to young Black and Brown communities who also don't know anything about it, and then they dive into it, and then they can change their lives from it, right? And so I'm extremely grateful to be a part of a workforce organization who is a part of the process of bridging that gap. Right, we do a lot of supportive services and barrier reduction and introducing and teaching and really learning who needs it, who can benefit from it, and we try to implement on both ends, like Cleveland mentioned, to the employers, to the students, to the community, to other organizations, and to those who we partner with, and even sharing our story with you guys. The work is here, the job is being done, so I'm glad to be here, and I'm open to any questions that you may have.
Awesome. Thanks, Shaquita. So folks, you know how this works. We're gonna have some Q&A here. John will be joining us in a little bit, and I'll introduce him when he does. But until then, we have 3 willing participants to field your questions. And Kelly House, you can go first.
Hi, thank you all for your time. I'm just wondering, I know with other aspects of the energy transition, sometimes there are concerns about whether the workforce meets the current or future anticipated demand. Can you speak to that? Like when it pertains to solar installation, do we have the workforce we need right now? And how, if not, how far off are we? And are there enough of these different training programs and other opportunities to get there right now?
Very good question. So, and I'll speak from my perspective from what I've seen. As far as the installer position, which is what most organizations started off training for, I would say there's more than enough of a pipeline for installers. What we're seeing now is the expansion into the other jobs in solar that traditionally without additional education or training, they weren't open to individuals, but they found a way. And even some of the developers, some of the solar companies are creating their own training modules as well. So once they're done with us, they may spend another 3 weeks in training with an employer. And now we're looking at guys becoming construction managers, site surveyors, sales, administrative side of solar, working in warehousing, transportation, distribution, and logistics. So I would say we don't need to train anymore, too many more installers, but we have to look at the other aspects of solar because it is growing. There are plenty of projects on the books that have yet to be opened up to these developers. And so once those projects are all approved by the state and they get underway, they're going to need people to get them done. So I'm not sure if I answered everything you were.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right, Audrey.
I had a question for whomever. My question is about and I think a couple of you spoke to that, lack of background getting into these training programs. Could one or all of you or any of you speak to some of the background that people don't have and ways of maybe making up that shortfall so that they're ready and prepared to take on these training programs?
Sure. So when you say lack of background, let me make sure I understand what you're saying. So you mean missing some kind of education component that they may need?
Exactly.
Okay. So here's the best part about all of this. If you're 18 years or older with a high school diploma or GED, and ambition, you basically qualify in a lot of ways. But legislation that was put in place caters more towards returning citizens, people who were part of the foster care system, Native Americans. So we're really trying to, they're really trying to touch, in a lot of ways, those who've been overlooked, traditionally overlooked, because we hear the stories all the time about, people saying, hey man, I did this time in jail and, nobody's really giving me a shot. Well, this legislation has helped change that. CJA, FEJA, both of them has really helped change that because now these developers are seeing that these solar companies. I keep saying developers because they're the ones over the bigger projects, the community solar. But they're seeing that, hey, these individuals have the ability to learn what they need them to learn. Not only that, but they're ambitious. They're willing to prove that they are different people, and they've shown themselves to be some of the hardest working folks out there. So, but as far as education goes, if they go through one of the training programs, that's typically anywhere between again, the starting point is 18 years or older, GED, high school diploma, be relatively sufficient in math, at least on a ninth to 10th grade level math. If they're there, they can do this work. At least the installer portion and some of the other jobs, they don't require as much. There are even, like the developers, what do you call it? I can't think of the name of the position, but I can't think of the name. But there's some positions that don't even require a lot of physicality. Like, these guys may be working from their cars, or from home most of the time. So it's really opening up doors for new opportunities that just weren't there in the past. And again, I can't stress it enough that the legislation has helped make this happen by writing, in the place that anybody who wants to receive these contracts, or even some of the federal funds that are available, state funds that are available to get these projects going, they have to hire a certain percentage of folks from these programs.
And Helena, see, you've got your hand raised. You feel free to jump in at any point.
The one thing that I can attest to is that once becoming an alumni, I'm sorry, a message had popped up. Once becoming an alumni, continuous education, I was offered the chance for many scholarships, not just towards going to university, but to continue in building in certain areas. So mentors have sent me things as far as things to go towards what I'm studying in school. So like finance, different cert programs for that, as well as project management, which helps me in solar because that helps me move up the ladder. So there are options and resources for continuous education after you complete the work training program.
And I got to give a disclaimer behind that. That's not all organizations do that. OAI is in a position to do that, as well as a couple of community partners that we're connected with, which allows us the ability to do that. But not all organizations that are doing solar training have the capacity to offer those additional services beyond completion of their program. So.
And Helena, I did have a kind of follow-up question to Audrey's, which is just how you came across OAI in the first place, or made that connection. How do people encounter it to then take advantage of what OAI is offering?
Yes. So for Chicago specifically, the biggest thing is word of mouth. I actually had a family member who was working with them and recruiting, and I actually started out just handing out flyers for her. And ended up applying and asking more questions, getting involved in actually making it into the program and completing the program, and continuing afterwards, like I said, recruiting for other cohorts, sharing things on Indeed, social media, especially for targeting younger audience. They're heavier on social media. I see it all the time. Peers of my job just got shut down. I'm looking for something for a new employer or to further my education. And I send them links. I send them everything. Anything that I see from OAI and their partnering groups, mentors or instructors from the program, I keep in touch with them. And I just send it to as many people as possible. Even my own family, they see what it has done for me. So my family is heavy in law enforcement, medical, military. And then they have those periods the same way where they're at home. And again, being motivated, there's this kind of spiritual shift now too, where you see from generations that this particular younger generation are work heavy. They want to work, they want to advance, they don't like being stagnant. They want a career to where they're not just on the lower end of the totem pole the whole time. They want to reach out, they want to help each other. So really just word of mouth and spreading the information is really the best way, and what I've seen has been effective.
Great, thanks. Do we have, so John, I do see that you joined us. Welcome. And I will introduce you in a minute. But want to make sure we get questions for Helena specifically, and if you have them, because I know that she can stay a little longer, but I also want to make sure you get to eat lunch. If this is your lunch break, Helena, and you're not eating lunch, that is not okay. And so don't let us take that from you.
I'm used to it. It's
Okay.
okay.
Yeah, Francisco, if you have a question, go for it.
I actually did. As far as Helena, I'm kind of curious about the work side of stuff. Is there a union that represents solar workers, like, and in Cleveland and Chiquita too? Is that something that you're involved in, like the kind of labor rights aspect of it?
So,
So
yeah,
oh, okay.
go ahead, Helene, you go
Okay.
first.
So specifically for my company, they are actually expanding, rapid expansion within just the last 3 months. We have a new company called Quest. So we're a one-stop shop. We supply the materials, we do mechanical, electrical sales, but our target area is mainly ground mounts and commercial. So we don't do any residential. And basically, when it comes to the work sites, depending on who the client is. So, for instance, now I'm at a site in Edwardsville, and we're actually on a Next Amp site. So we actually have some work where we work with other companies or do subcontracting and things of that nature. So Illinois, for instance, is a prevailing wage state. So when you're here and you're under W-2, you get your prevailing wage. We have amazing benefits packages. They have a union on this site, so they are site specific. Whoever the contractor is, they have, I guess, an area where they make the site a union site depending on the county. It gets very specific. Prevailing wage changes by county, so it really just depends on the company that you work for and what site and the area.
Yeah. So to add to that, right now, so we don't work directly with any union for the solar industry, other than IBEW, which is electrical. But right now, there's no requirement that any of the workers are in a union. Now, Helena mentioned that because of the laws in the state of Illinois, if they're working on a site, a prevailing wage site, they're going to get union type pay anyway, without the deductions of the union dues and all those sorts of things. So right now it's a beautiful world, but we know Chicago, and there's no telling if they may ever go that route and how that will affect the industry. But right now it's not required.
Right,
Thank
great.
you.
Tom had a question.
Yeah, this is a little bit high level politics in Washington, but I wanted to get your thoughts on how this may affect the domestic supply chain and the kinds of things that you guys are doing. I've been writing about, including a story today. First Solar is the Western Hemisphere's largest solar panel manufacturer, and it's based here in the Toledo area. And yesterday, their CEO testified before the Senate Finance Committee about tariffs that are potentially causing them unfair competition. There's been some discussion about Southeastern Asian countries using China-made products to flood the market here in the U.S. And there is testimony that China's been doing this since 1985 in other countries as well as the U.S., trying to get control of the supply chains. I just wondered, how much, I know that you guys, your focus is in, bringing people from underserved communities into the job market, but your ability to do that's going to rely on the strength of the domestic supply chain. And, if it's great to have goals like that, but you have to have a strong domestic supply chain. And I just wondered if you guys could comment about, it may not be the top of order things you're looking at, but just your impression of how strong is our domestic supply chain? How vulnerable are we to these few dollars that the Biden administration plays with tariffs? They lowered them for 2 years in an effort to help jumpstart the industry.
We are not politically affiliated in any way, but
yeah.
I will give you my observation and what I have seen. So when Donald Trump was in office, Donald Trump imposed tariffs against China. Now, a lot of the panels that were being used here in Illinois in the Midwest were coming directly from China because they made a very competitive, and this is what I was told by the solar companies and some developers. So China was making a product that was just as reliable as the American product, but the price appeared to be a lot better. So what that meant for these guys who were doing these community solar projects, they were saving a ton of money. And, that hits the bottom line. So when Donald Trump imposed the tariffs when he was in office, that forced him to look at purchasing from manufacturers here in the U.S. Well, the product was just as good, but the pricing made it difficult for them, according to them, to make as much money on these projects. And so the industry did slow down a little bit. It definitely was affected by it. Now, since Biden has kind of loosened the reins on some of those tariffs, I see the project still happening. I'm sure developers and solar companies, installers are happy to see those tariffs lifted because they can go back to buying those products. But as far as seeing the market affected by the sales of domestically manufactured products, I don't know, because I think if tariffs aren't put in place to kind of limit how much we're purchasing from China, it will be affected in a negative way, just from what I've seen, because they don't want to pay the prices that American manufacturers are asking, because they can get a product of similar quality for a better price, imported in. So it does affect it. It does. Now, how big of an impact, I can't say, because Illinois, again, legislation is helping to push these projects. Push them along, because I don't know if you guys know, but there's funding available for developers and solar companies too. There's some financial benefits for them doing business here. And I would love to see us buy domestically. I would love to see, it would be fantastic if the state where these solar panels are being installed was the manufacturer, so the local economies in all of these areas would truly feel the impact of it. But unfortunately, that's not a reality right now. So,
well, the allegation has been that China's a master at flooding markets by undercutting prices. And there are many Great Lakes legislators, Sherrod Brown, Marcy Kaptur, and many others who are, opposed to what Biden has done and is afraid that if they are successful at flooding the market here in the US, then they could take control of the supply chain and affect the US economy that way. That that's the allegation, that for national security, that we need more of a stronger domestic supply chain.
I agree, but the reality is they already have a very big stronghold on the market. I mean, that's where they are. And but the other reality is they can only do what we allow them to do. Again, I don't side with any political party. I don't favor one over the other. But the truth is, these countries can only do what we allow them to do. So, we want to see change. We got to put legislation in place to to help affect that. So,
Okay.
I'm curious, John, did you have anything to add to that? I was gonna introduce you and have you present, and it'd be all nice and tidy, but I'm thinking your role at Vote Solar, you might have thoughts. If not, no worries. But since you're in the room.
Yeah, thanks, Adam, and thanks for the question, Tom. I'll introduce myself in just a little bit, but on the topic of tariffs, so disclaimer, Vote Solar is primarily working at the state level, but obviously we see a lot of ripples from the federal work, and we tend to be more favorable towards carrots than sticks when it comes to empowering a domestic manufacturing market. So the Inflation Reduction Act included a 10% tax credit adder for domestic content. So that base tax credit is already 30% off the sticker price of a solar install. And if you can demonstrate that a certain amount of the content is domestic, you get an additional 10% on that tax credit. And there's a whole layer cake of values on that tax credit that a lot of developers are pursuing. But we're excited to see that start to tip the scales ever so slightly in favor of domestic manufacturing, because we'd love to bring the jobs here. We think that we've got a lot of the tools to ensure that those jobs are made well and equitably and following pretty strong environmental and social regulations in ways that we can't necessarily control overseas. So we're supportive of onshoring, and we're a little bit concerned about tariffs. The solar coaster, as we call it, is wild enough as it is, without having to have tariffs come and go every few months.
All right. Thanks, John. Did anybody have another question? Helena, we're gonna let you go so you don't have to just sit in your vehicle staring at even smaller tiny faces on your phone, because they're pretty small on my desk and on my laptop. But before we do, if anybody wants had another question pop up, now is your chance. And if not, I think we'll let John present, and then have Shaquita, Cleveland, and John field some questions as well. So no? Okay. Well, this, Helena, is your sitting ovation. Thank you so much for joining us. We're thrilled that you could make some time for us. And everyone here is going to get contact info for all of our speakers. So don't be surprised if somebody follows up with an email or something as they start looking into stories on this subject.
Okay, and I just wanted to say thank you all for the opportunity to speak, and I look forward to speaking to some of you later or anything. I don't have a problem with being contacted. So again, thank you.
All right. Thanks, Helena. We really do appreciate it. Good luck with everything. And
Thank you.
and I'm glad to see that you safety first.
Yeah.
Everyone should wear a hard hat when a group of journalists shows up. That's what I think. Take care.
Right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, folks. So this was a little, unorthodox in our order here, but I'm glad we got to talk to Helena. And now I will quickly introduce John. John Delury is Deputy Program Manager for the Midwest at Vote Solar, where he coordinates campaigns for Vote Solar's legislative and regulatory priorities throughout the Midwest. Prior to joining Vote Solar, he helped build low-income solar programs for solar companies. He has prior experience coordinating grassroots advocacy efforts for the Sierra Club and voter turnout initiatives for electoral candidates. John is also a Boren Fellowship recipient for Swahili, having worked overseas on off-grid solar and electricity access in India and East Africa. He believes that the climate crisis provides an invitation to begin addressing longstanding economic injustice and that historically overburdened communities should lead the way to our renewable energy future. So he is definitely on the right panel. And John, I'll let you tell us a little bit more about your work and yourself, and then we can keep going with some Q&A.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. Thanks for the invitation and the opportunity. And it's good to see you all. I actually recognize a lot of names. I admire your work. Thanks for helping to shine a light on this clean energy transition, and especially for caring about making it equitable and inclusive. So I'm going to do a quick intro, but then I'm going to pivot to some slides. I just wanted to check in. Unfortunately, I had to miss the first half hour or so. Is it still helpful, Adam, to do sort of a zoom out of some of those CJA programs and to see the structure of that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. So I'll share 3 or 4 slides on that. And then I have a few just reflections about the clean energy transition and the role that workers and contractors play. But then excited for questions. So I'll try to keep this brief. But I'm John. I use he, him pronouns. I lead the Midwest for Vote Solar. I've got a team of 4 roaming around the region, trying to write, pass, and then implement good, equitable solar laws. In Illinois, where I'll spend most of the time today, I sit on the steering committee of the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition, which is a supergroup of individual advocacy organizations, labor affiliates, faith-based groups, environmental justice groups. That really was the original driving force behind CJA, the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act. And then 2.5 years later, through sweat, blood, and tears, we managed to get the thing done. So I'm going to unpack just a small corner of that bill, but there's a lot, obviously, that I won't be able to cover. It was 956 pages. So it contains a lot of different facets that I'm sure you all have seen and probably covered at times. Okay. So yeah, so like I said, I had the honor, honestly, to be in the room where at least some of this was happening. So I was on sort of the negotiating team for CJA. I helped write a decent sized chunk of it, and was trying to carry as much water as possible for a lot of different organizations representing a lot of different communities. So that's us mean mugging on the Capitol steps, and then us over at the signing ceremony at the aquarium. And obviously, the tail end of this, I had an eye twitch for about 6 months. I thought my work was hard, but it wasn't nearly as hard as the work of OAI and a bunch of other people who are now trying to breathe life into this bill. It's easy to write it. It's a lot harder to do it. Again, just flagging all the different facets of CJA. It is, I believe, the most comprehensive, certainly the most equitable climate law in the nation. And it touches on all of these different components, but I'll be really just focusing in on this top left quadrant, the jobs and economic justice. Again, these are broader numbers. I won't touch on all these dollar figures. I will briefly unpack this 40% number. We were very focused on Justice 40 before it became a federal priority. I won't claim any provenance for that. I think we arrived at it for different reasons, but our coalition kept focused on the fact that 40% of Illinois' population is non-white, right, or people of color. And that was not what the industry looked like. That was not what the labor unions looked like. That was not reflected in this clean energy workforce. And so we wanted to ensure that the policies we wrote were truly equitable. So going above and beyond to divert those benefits to Black, Indigenous people of color to ensure that we hit that 40 mark eventually, knowing that we'd have to overdo it to get there, right? These benefits don't naturally flow towards under-resourced communities, you have to design policy deliberately to bend that flow and to redirect it. And that's what we did. So first, I'll just explain how we prioritized certain communities. We realized for a lot of different issues that I won't go into here, that we couldn't just write, BIPOC communities into the legislation. A lot of that is unfortunate ripples from Equal Protections Act legislating and from honestly a fairly conservative judiciary that prevents you from doing a lot of race-based prioritization. But there is nothing stopping you from place-based prioritization. And that's what the Biden administration is doing through a lot of the Inflation Reduction Act. It's what we decided to do through CJA. So we looked at two target geographies. One is a map that we already had. Well, I guess both are maps we already had. One was environmental justice communities, which, you can read the explanation here. The other is these R3 areas. I would say EJ is more rooted in cumulative impact, pollution, things like that, in addition to other like socioeconomic factors. R3 came out of the cannabis legalization process. And that was honestly more focused on impacts of like the police state and encounters with the justice system. So together we used those maps to target specific communities and ensure that anybody who lived in those communities had priority access to these CJA programs. So those communities together we called equitable investment eligible communities. And residents there become equity eligible persons. And that's sort of the codex. That is who is granted priority access to these programs. In addition, people who are foster care alumni or who are returning residents, people who were formerly incarcerated, they also have priority access. So there are now 13 clean energy hubs throughout Illinois. It has unfortunately, as I think some of you have covered or kept track of, been slow. It's been slow going. Fortunately, there's still FEJA workforce programs. I think OAI is helping to carry that torch. But the new programs have been really slow. We're just now starting to see them launch in a lot of these locations around the state. So there are 13 hubs. And then there are all these other programs that come along with it. There's a specific program for returning residents that actually takes place in the prisons, in the carceral institutions, to help prepare returning residents before they leave. There's a pre-apprenticeship program, which is specific to labor unions to ensure that they have the tools they need to retool their workforce and broaden their scope. And then recognizing that you can't just open a program and assume that people will arrive. We created these barrier reduction programs and these navigators. This is specific funding just to help ensure that people can go to the training. And I'll talk about that more in just a second. But then we realized it's not enough to just give people jobs. We wanted to create wealth building opportunities. We wanted to find pathways to own businesses and to get an actual foothold in the clean energy economy. And so that's where these incubators and accelerators came from. Every hub location, all 13, also have a contractor incubator. You want to grab a friend, you want to buy a truck and start just like an install company just to help start doing some rooftop solar. This is your place. This is what's going to help you do that, going to help you set up the back office stuff, going to help you actually navigate into that business ownership world. Let's say you got a truck and now you want to become a developer, right? You want to start owning these projects, soup to nuts. You may want to consider the Primes Contractor Accelerator. We've got 3 of those, sort of regional in the state, and that's going to help you take that next big leap. It's also going to come with some money and some support. There is additional support, which I'll touch on in just a second, but we wanted to ensure that folks who are coming out of these incubators, coming out of these accelerators, then had some financial support in the form of grants and really low cost financing. All right, you'll have to bear with me for just a second here. I know this looks a little intimidating, like something you may have found in a high school textbook, but I think it actually illustrates the process here. So in the red here, you'll see a lot of the barriers that often stop people, especially people who might be working 2 jobs or covering a lot of ground or might not have resources to get in the door in the first place. These barriers are reduced through the barrier reduction program. This offers things like stipends to attend the class and transportation, even childcare, I believe, is included in their scope. There's also these navigators. This is separate community-based organizations just to help the potential workers and business owners get into this ecosystem of training. So we really try to think through, how do we ensure that these programs work once they're launched? And then sort of within, you can see this incubator of different clean energy workforce hubs and contractor incubators and accelerators. But again, we realized it wouldn't be enough. We wanted to ensure that there was an engine to hire, to incentivize clean energy companies to hire graduates and to partner with businesses that are emerging from these hubs or from these incubators. And so that's where the equity accountability system comes into play. I think I heard Cleveland mention that, but we, I think, are the first and perhaps the only state that has this type of threshold that companies need to meet in order to ensure that they are compliant with state regulations. If they want the state incentives, they need to demonstrate that they have hired equitably and inclusively. And that means that starting this year, and the reporting I think is due in just a couple months, they are going to have to show that this past year, so starting July 1 through this spring, they brought in 10% of their workforce as equity eligible persons. So they're going to be held to account to ensure that they went through and talked to these training entities and sought out their graduates. I hope that that's having ripples in the landscape. I'm sure Cleveland and the OAI team could speak to that a little bit, but that was the goal. Then that would increase the 40%, hopefully constantly focusing those companies on hiring from these programs. So I'm going to continue on to just a few closing thoughts here, but there's this whole separate world of inclusive financing where CEJA created 2 green banks, and we're currently scheming about how to ensure that that federal money also follows those Justice 40 principles and brings the money to where it's needed. Lightning round. You all might already be familiar with Clean Jobs Midwest. This is put on by our friends at E2. The website is cleanjobsmidwest.com, but just wanted to flag that as of last measurement, which I think was for 2022, Michigan actually beat out Illinois for clean energy jobs by, I think, 15 jobs. Obviously, this is an imperfect science, but I did want to just highlight a couple things. One is that I think we often forget, and this is coming from a guy who works for Vote Solar, right? A solar advocacy nonprofit. Energy efficiency has a ton of jobs. It is the majority of clean energy jobs, is just making homes warmer and safer and more comfortable. Renewable energy is increasing each year at a very fast pace, but energy efficiency is still a lot of the jobs out there. So we sometimes have to think bigger about what the clean energy future will look like. The website also includes these breakdowns of different sort of subsectors. I know that's probably a little hard to read, but encourage you to go to the website and take it for a spin. It includes just about all Midwestern states. So no matter where you're reporting from, you can probably get some information here. There's Michigan, again, like 20 jobs ahead of Illinois. But you'll see these jobs are a lot in the clean transportation sector. Michigan's auto manufacturers are starting to retool for electric vehicles, and those are clean jobs by their measure at least. So that is a whole nother segment of the economy that is going clean and hopefully going to provide even more jobs as we electrify. Same here, you can sort of see where the hybrid vehicles are composed. You can see the solar wind split over here. All right, final thoughts and a stray bullet. I got in yesterday from a fairly long trip and was really excited to join this, but I'm not as prepared as I typically am, so apologies. Labor unions represent the jobs of today, not the jobs of tomorrow. This is something we learned the hard way in a few different bills. My team was involved in the recent legislation in Minnesota, in Michigan, in Illinois. We're very proud to have seen, I think, the 3 most recent states that go 100% all be in the Midwest. It's an exciting time to be alive. And in each of those instances, we worked at times alongside our brothers and sisters in labor, and at times opposed to labor unions. It's just a really interesting dynamic, right? Labor is not a monolith. They represent a lot of different segments of the economy. They also represent a lot of fossil workers who are well paid and have stable jobs. And there are going to be locals, there are going to be specific segments of labor that are fighting tooth and nail for those jobs. Those are their members, right? Their members are not the solar workers of 6 years from now. Their members are the workers of right now, who in large part are fossil. So they often feel torn between protecting those jobs and supporting those current members and preparing for those clean energy workers that they know are on the horizon. We're starting to see more and more of that place in the clean energy future. It helps to have policies like prevailing wage, like we have in Illinois, and are starting to see just through federal legislation at this point. Project labor agreements are also high on the wish list, and that is designed to ensure that the projects are built by labor unions. Hiring halls are sort of interesting, right? I think it's easy to think about clean energy jobs as you've got somebody working a 40-hour work week who gets on roofs and installs panels. It's not quite that simple. You have electricians who just roam around to different projects. They might be working on a skyscraper, wiring that one day, and then heading out to a community solar project the next day to work on that. You've got laborers who might be doing a lot of different types of work and might only work on clean energy part of the year. It's hard to measure. The borders are pretty porous, especially when it comes to the hiring halls for labor unions. I think this topic has been addressed a lot, but right, those clean energy jobs are plentiful. We do not have enough people currently to do everything we need to do to transition to clean energy. But the work is different, right? It's not rooted in your hometown at the coal plant down the road. It is possibly roaming around, working on different projects in different areas. You might see more work in one month and less work the next month, but it all depends on the type of projects that you're working on. But we do need to acknowledge and prepare for that change. And then the last point, I promise. We need to electrify everything. We don't have the workers to do that yet. I don't think we have fully grasped the amount of electricians that we're going to need to just upgrade service panels and install chargers in everyone's garage or apartment building. Like, this is not a zero-sum game. We're going to need so many more workers than we're currently even preparing for, despite all of Illinois' commitments, despite these 13 hubs and contractor incubators. I am sure we are still going to come up shy. And so we're hoping to start painting that picture of abundance when it comes to local jobs and local work, because that's what these jobs are when you electrify. It stays in the community and it has economic ripples. So I'll wrap up there. Again, I'm John. I'll put my email in the chat. And thanks again all for covering all this important work and for listening to this brief presentation.
Yeah, thanks, John. And thanks, Cleveland and Shaquita, for still hanging in there. Now we're to second Q&A round, and Izzy has a question, so go for it.
Hey, John, thanks so much for taking some time to give your presentation. I was curious when you were talking about jobs and, the differences that come up between, this push for clean energy jobs and some labor unions. how successful the pitch has been to, which I've heard from certain companies and other folks in the industry, to say like, oh, we might be losing these fossil fuel-based jobs, but we will be providing clean energy jobs. You know, like what has the response been to that? Because obviously, as you mentioned, they are different, you know, kind of in their nature and location-wise.
Yeah, mixed reactions, I would say. I think there's general recognition that unions, especially with rules like prevailing wage and project labor agreements, they're not going to lose membership, but they might lose members, right? It's this difference between individual persons that they work with and represent, and just like the numbers on the board of how many members they might have. They know they're going to be pulling in some new people in the clean energy future, and they know that it's not going to be all of those people that are currently working at coal or gas plants, that some of those people who are rooted in a community might find work elsewhere if a coal plant shuts down. They might put their skills towards different uses, and they may no longer be union members. So again, like the labor union's job is to fight for those specific members of today, of those people that have those jobs, and to try to keep those jobs. They're keeping one eye on that bigger picture of perhaps expanding their membership through embracing the clean energy future. But I think, you know, economic transitions are constantly happening. We are thoughtful policy professionals and makers, and so we want to make this transition as supportive and seamless as possible. That's why, for example, Michigan just passed SB 519 that creates a whole new office of worker transition. But we also don't want to deceive anyone. It's not going to be a one-for-one. Not every worker is going to find that home in the clean energy future. They might not want to. They might launch their careers into a different direction. We just want to be able to support them if they choose to go this route, and support their communities either way, which CJA did in a few different ways.
Cleveland or Shaquita, did you have anything to add to that question?
No, I think it was well stated.
Okay.
John's done a great job.
We've got them piling up, so I'm sure we'll have more. Ashley, you had a question.
Yeah, hi, this is for John. You mentioned the development, I think, of 2 different green banks, and I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that, or about just the status of green banks in the Midwest in general, what the overall picture is there.
Yeah, I'm glad you grabbed that. It's something that I've been working on a lot, really excited about the landscape in Illinois, where we have 2 banks at slightly different altitudes doing really important complementary work. So CJA created the Climate Bank out of the existing Illinois Finance Authority. This is a maybe 20-year-old infrastructure bank in Illinois. They now have new authorities and responsibilities, and are currently serving as the primary plumbing to bring federal funding to Illinois. So they're doing a lot of the applications on behalf of the state. It's a state entity. CJA recognized that larger state entities are, 1, liable to shift with political tides, and 2, often move slowly and have trouble closing gaps when it comes to disparities in funding and finance. So we created a whole separate nonprofit green bank called the Clean Energy Jobs and Justice Fund. They are about to launch. They're currently hiring their executive director. So spread the word if you grab that job description. But the board is terrific. It represents a lot of different corners of the state, and they are laser focused on equitable and inclusive lending, and down to the retail level, right? Supporting smaller BIPOC contractors, supporting residents of environmental justice communities to electrify. Their focus is exclusively on things that are more related to Justice 40. The Midwest in general, green banks are popping up all over the place. I think folks in this call are probably tracking the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which is a $27 billion pot of money in the Inflation Reduction Act that not only helps to create money for green banks, it creates money to create green banks. So there's a whole accelerator within the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund to help states increase capacity of their green bank infrastructure.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Ashley. Tiffany had a question.
Thanks. This question's for John or anyone who thinks that they can answer. I was wondering if you have a sense of any difference between the amount of training or years of education people need for the clean energy sector versus fossil fuel jobs. So are there the same amount of jobs in clean energy for people with just a high school diploma? Is the kind of barrier to entry the same?
I'll be brief. I'd really love to hear what the OAI team says.
Yeah, so you know what, to be honest, that's not something we've measured. We haven't really looked at it. Yeah. Yeah, that's I would love to know the answer to that myself.
Thanks, fair enough.
And I'll share in the chat here, the Interstate Renewable Energy Council has a really interesting like career map visual, which sort of shows different roles in solar or in, you know, electrification, and like what level you might need to tap into those roles. I can't speak as much for the fossil jobs. I know that a lot of people, you know, walked in with a GED and then were suddenly, or I guess through some training that the unions provided, managing nuclear plants, right? I'm not sure that would happen anywhere anymore. A lot of those people have been around for a while and were, you know, trained through apprenticeships. I know that a lot of the solar and wind jobs are entry level, right? Most of the techs and install jobs are very much open to anybody, but those are the jobs we think of first. And there are a lot of jobs that might require an advanced degree, but the vast majority of them do not.
Thanks.
Does the map happen to cover like retention, like job retention by any chance? Or is that measured?
Yes, retention is measured. I'm not sure. So CJA is still fairly new, but I know for FIJA we were going up to two to 3 years. I think CJA might be very similar. That we follow students. And then some of the other grants that OEI deals with require us to have up to 5 years of retention. Like the Financial Opportunity Center that we are a partner with, LISC's funding, we follow students for up to 5 years in their career.
Thanks, Cleveland. Kelly had a question.
Yeah, and this is for anyone who can answer it, but I think it was John who said, not every worker is going to find a home in the clean energy future. That could be for a variety of reasons, but it seemed like you were indicating that there is a little bit, at least some degree of mismatch between like the number of jobs that exist in fossil fuel dependent energy and the number that will be created in this transition. Do you know what the mismatch is? And like where it's going to be most, you know, I obviously think of coal country. There's clearly going to be a mismatch there because they create a lot of, you know, but I'm in Michigan, so I guess I care most about the Great Lakes region. Is there a mismatch here, and how big or small is it?
Yeah, I wish I had the numbers in front of me. I had them during siege negotiations, but if there is a mismatch, it is that there are not enough fossil workers to fill all of the new clean energy jobs. There are shockingly few fossil fuel workers, and a lot of that was just through automation, right? This has nothing to do with clean energy or environmental regulation. It was just these plants got really easy to run with a skeleton crew, and a lot of people have been losing their job slowly and through less sort of politically potent means over decades. And so there are not that many fossil fuel workers. And those workers will certainly be able to find a home in the clean energy future. I think my comments were more related to, we don't know that they will want to. They may find some other form of work. The economy is constantly changing and people are constantly finding different lines of work. And so I don't think we should have that expectation that they will all head in that direction. But I am very confident that if they want a home in the clean energy future, they'll find one, just because we need so many more workers than we currently have.
All right, Luann had a question.
No worries. Yeah, so John mentioned that CEJA created all these opportunities for training for equity eligible workforce. And OAI is one of these groups that is stepping in to do the training. It seems like you all have been around, but are like kind of retooling in order to train the new clean energy workforce. So I'm just curious about the landscape of training entities in Illinois and like whether this kind of training is mostly provided by groups like yours, or is this like something community colleges are doing, or like where is this training taking place, and are there new training programs being created as we speak?
So I wouldn't say we're retooling. We're looking to expand a little bit because we came in on the FIJA grant, the FIJA legislation, which was back like 2017, 2018, somewhere around there. So we started training even back then, and we're just transitioning from FIJA into CEJA. A lot of the work is the same. There's some new requirements that come along with the CEJA grant, but we're looking to produce the same outcomes, which is great jobs, for underserved individuals and communities. As far as who's doing the training, there are the other community organizations like OAI. There's also city colleges. Probably, and John may know a little bit more about this. There's probably a handful of colleges that are training as well. I do know of a few, but a lot of them are just nonprofits that were doing workforce development in other areas and decided to figure out how to implement the training to get involved in solar and to fill that void.
All right. Anyone jumping out into that one, or should I move on to, I think we have time for one last question. And Michael Hawthorne has it.
Yeah, just to follow up to the last question, my understanding is one of the more sluggish areas of implementing the Illinois law is downstate in the communities that once had coal plants, for example. And some local officials that I talk to every now and then down there say that they still wonder, what's up with the state's efforts to retrain or attract clean energy workers and train clean energy workers on some of these sites that are perhaps transitioning from being coal plants, but because they're attached to the electric grid, or maybe going to be solar or other battery storage, something like that. Can any of you speak to that?
John, you want to go first, or?
I can go back to you.
Yeah, so the only thing I can say is that, and this is from my perspective, is that they really just don't have enough organizations down there to do the training. That's what I've seen. I can't speak on the population and their interest in clean energy jobs. I don't know, because my focus is up, in Chicago, obviously. And I think there's been a lack of service to those parts of the state, because the folks who are trained here in Chicago, where we get the majority of the students from, that those students are allowed to travel and go to other parts of the state to do the work. So I think it's just a matter of and this is where the navigators are going to come in, gaining interest in getting some training providers down there to do the work, and I think that'll probably help change it.
Yeah, and I would add, I mentioned this, and I would be happy to speak more freely on a separate call at some point, that it has been slow to implement some of these workforce and contractor programs. The Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, which had largely been defunded by Governor Pritzker's predecessor, was given a large mandate in CEJA, right? They've got a budget of $120+ million just for these workforce and equity programs. And they had to restaff. They just had to like get their legs under them. That's taken some time. We're now well past the 2-year mark of CEJA's passage, and we're starting to see it finally bear fruit. So they're starting to announce these hubs, but they don't have all 13 yet. And I know there are still some gaps, I think downstate, where they're still just trying to figure out the right partnership. Is it a community college here and a community-based organization there to become the training providers in these more rural and more sparsely populated areas, frankly. And so I think like that will take some time, but it is always hard with any bill, the disconnect between passage and implementation. So we're hopeful.
Yeah,
on that.
I mean, you make a great point that the downstate population is becoming older. There's fewer people downstate now. So, it's a lot of land, but not a lot of people. The people are up here in our area. And I guess, right, what Cleveland said, it's does anybody want to actually work downstate is one of the questions too.
Yeah, and I'll flag just a couple other quick things. I know we're approaching time. There's a coal to solar program in CEJA, which is designed to put these new assets directly on the grid where they're most helpful, right? The poles and wires are already there for the coal plant. Let's put solar and storage there. And so we're starting to see some of those projects emerge. Some of those procurements were successful. That's going to, I think, spark a lot of interest in the clean energy future. We also know we just have to build a bunch of transmission, like the poles and wires, everything from the stuff leading to your house to the stuff, stretching across the big wires. We're going to need a lot more of it. And a lot of that has to happen in the Ameren downstate service territory. So a lot of work needed. I think it's just going to take some time for that transition to be fully evident to people.
All right, right on time. Look at us. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Cleveland, Shaquita, John, we really appreciate this. Here's another round of raucous applause. It was great to get to explore this topic a little bit, get some thoughts percolating and ideas on people's radar, and I'm sure they'll be following up with all of you. And good luck doing what you do. And it is, like John said, it's exciting times to see where this all takes us. For our